In 2002, when the co-creator of Crocs viewed a prototype of the shoes, all he could say was, "Those are ugly." Worn by celebrities and even on the catwalk at Paris Fashion Week, those awful shoes eventually became a publicly traded firm worth billions. How did three entrepreneurs with zero background in the shoe business create a global powerhouse? Here is the shocking, little-known reality about Crocs. Lyndon Hansen hit rock bottom in 2002. His mother was terminally ill with cancer. He had recently divorced, and he was no longer an employee in the computer hardware industry. He crashed at a friend's place. George Bodecker and Scott Siemens, who had known Lyndon for a long time, recognized his need to be encouraged. They decided to take Lyndon on a Caribbean sailing excursion to distract him from his problems. Scott was a low-key innovator who made a good living by developing and patenting new products. This voyage occurred when he was 48 years old and was feeling his age. Scott made some clogs out of rubber and had Lyndon and George try them on. As a result of seeing something similar in Canada while traveling for business, he started working on them. A Quebec firm called Foam Creations Incorporated produced the pioneering model. Rubber and plastic were not in their construction. They were designed to suit the foot well and were made of a special resin that didn't absorb odors or water and wouldn't slide around on a boat deck. The lack of a backstrap was Scott's sole complaint about the original design, so he sewed one. He believed his improved clog design would be a hit in the United States if he could get investors. As a result, he couldn't wait to show the two pals what he had created. Scott was optimistic that the ugly shoes would sell, but his buddies George and Lyndon didn't share his optimism. However, they altered their opinions after trying on the shoes and experiencing low weight and comfort. They thought so highly of them that they went into business with them. Like crocodiles, these shoes are worn on land and in water, which is why the brand was named Crocs. Now, George was a prosperous man in his own right. He had a rough upbringing but went on to own over 100 Domino's pizza franchises. He made his fortune as an executive at the sandwich chain, Quiznos, after starting his lawn mowing business at age 10. Although the three had a great deal of business expertise, they all had real estate backgrounds. The new company's first item of business was to figure out how to market and sell these peculiar Canadian shoes in the United States. While George provided initial funding, Scott focused on the product and Lyndon provided leadership. They rented an office in Boulder, Colorado, and placed their initial order with the manufacturer. Next, they started planning out the best way to market them. They traveled to a Florida boat expo in 2002 because they knew, at the very least, that these shoes would be beneficial on a boat deck and hoped that the novelty and originality of the product would persuade purchasers to try them on and discover how comfortable and convenient they were. Their strategy consisted of hurling shoes at passersby and telling individuals who considered them ugly to simply try them on. According to reports, the co-creators sold over 200 pairs during the boat exhibition, so the strategy paid off. They did not foresee the vast demand for Crocs outside of the marine industry. From people who spend long shifts on their feet in other environments, including hospitals, restaurants, and kitchens. There was no way for the founders to predict how big the company would become, but they felt confident that they had hit a cultural chord and located a previously untapped consumer market. Others, however, saw Crocs as nothing more than a fleeting fashion trend or a horrible fad. However, it wasn't failing. In 2003, 76,000 pairs of shoes were sold. And in 2005 and 2006, sales grew by 226%. The founders made a brilliant move by acquiring Foam Creations Incorporated to secure ownership of the proprietary foam material called Croslite. The company also made some astute moves by inventing a distribution and replenishment method that was novel in the shoe industry. Instead of stocking up on hundreds of pairs of Crocs and then discounting the ones they didn't sell, merchants could purchase as little as 24 at a time and reorder as needed. It reduced the danger for stores to carry Crocs, which led to more stores carrying the shoes, although many consumers disliked them. But because they were so noticeable, they received a lot of attention, which proved priceless as the demand for their shoes exploded. The initial public offering of Crocs in 2006 raised $239 million, making it the largest IPO ever for footwear. Its current worth exceeds $1 billion. Crocs founders and early investors made millions from the company's rapid growth. It was challenging to meet the needs of seemingly endless change. Lyndon said the founders were exhausted from working hard to grow the company. But one man was more affected because the mood in the company began to turn sour in the fall of 2006. George Bodecker, The co-founder who invited Lyndon on the boat excursion that started it all made a peculiar phone call to his brother-in-law shortly after the business went public. George allegedly told his brother-in-law in a police statement, quote, "I'll bury you so deep that no one will ever find you. I'll slash your throat." A quarter of an hour later, George confronted his brother-in-law at his place of work. It's unclear why George attacked his brother-in-law, but reports show the Crocs co-founder's bizarre behavior in and out of the workplace on more than one occasion. His removal from the Crocs board of directors after a series of scandals only inflamed his resentment. One former employee said, "You don't want to mention the name George Bodecker in the office because it's a dirty word at Crocs now." The company wouldn't exist without his passion and management in the early years. However, after driving under the influence of alcohol, Crocs put as much distance between themselves and George. He allegedly claimed that his pop star girlfriend, Taylor Swift, had been behind the wheel, even though neither Swift nor anybody else was in the car with him. He was very drunk, and when word of this spread, it did not bode well for the company. George resigned as CEO, and Lyndon's friend replaced him. The man who revitalized the Crocs brand is none other than Ron Snyder. While he was CEO, Crocs went from selling just 2 styles of his shoe to selling around 250. Stock prices and earnings rose as the company expanded into new international markets. In addition, the company started buying similar businesses such as Jibbitz, which made charms that people could add to Crocs to make them more unique. Crocs partnered with many well-known brands for licensing, including Disney and the NBA. They reached an invincible peak right then. Changes started happening in 2007, though. The 2008 financial crisis was devastating for Crocs, as it was for many other companies. Consumers were not making purchases, which led to a decline in sales and a subsequent drop in stock prices. Crocs predicted a drop in sales, and in the years that followed, the company reduced its workforce and saw its stock price continue to fall. Then in 2008, a company named Select LLC charged Crocs with infringing upon a 1999 pattern for highly similar material to Crocs crosslights, adding to the company's financial hardships. Additionally, the accuser stated that Scott was aware of the existence of an Italian shoe similar to Crocs and that this shoe served as the inspiration. The stock price continued to fall as accusations of stealing a design were made, but Crocs is still strong today. What turned around the fortunes of the notoriously ugly shoe? For Crocs, rapid growth marked the beginning of an unsustainable avalanche of overexpansion and excess inventory that left the company largely stagnant from 2008 to 2018. Stocks, though, began to rise again. The fact that several celebrities had been sighted wearing their shoes was also a brilliant marketing boost. Now, Crocs has experimented with various styles that aren't quite as hideous, and hence, more appealing to a broader audience. However, they finally realized their strength was in people's extreme opinions about the shoes. As a result, Crocs began spreading a message of openness, uniqueness, and originality. The chief marketing officer claims that wearers have a strong sense of individuality. They made an effort to portray Crocs as having a carefree demeanor that doesn't give a hoot about what other people think. Afterward, they paired the message with savvy collaborations with celebrities like Justin Bieber and Post Malone. Even Kentucky Fried Chicken got in on the action, providing authentic chicken scented chew charms. Crocs morphed into a cultural chameleon, forming partnerships with establishments as disparate as Barney's and fashion houses with a sophisticated and avant-garde aesthetic, as well as those with a more lowbrow aesthetic. Balenciaga also rode the wave of popularity, releasing several series of groundbreaking platform footwear. Any Crocs spotted on the Paris runways swiftly disappeared from store shelves. The approach Crocs used in actively seeking collaborations was highly strategic, as they zeroed in on partnerships they knew would garner a lot of attention due to their novelty. Any exposure, such as hearing that Crocs have partnered with Cheerio cereal or worn by high-end fashion models, has produced more publicity. Crocs unexpectedly did well in the pandemic economy, which was terrible news for most of the apparel industry. The core of Crocs grew and developed. 2020 was their best year, with sales hitting record highs and stock prices skyrocketing thanks to a growing demand for fashionable conveniences. Many of Crocs' costly brick-and-mortar stores were closed in preparation for a greater emphasis on e-commerce. The company had also begun using priority sizing for online sales. Earnings for Crocs hit $2.32 billion in 2021, an all-time high, as a footwear manufacturer staying current is one of Crocs' most challenging problems. The question arises with every new season of whether an element of fashion is only a fad or a permanent part of international culture. However, Crocs have a global reputation thanks to their popularity during the past 2 decades. In addition, the company is doing better financially than ever before, which is particularly impressive given that its founders agreed that the product in question was aesthetically deficient.